What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. Recently, I've been going through a first draft of a novel that needs a lot of work. In the past, revision was something that always eluded me. I never understood how to take a rough draft and re-envision it in a way that would make it stronger. I had plenty of feedback from classmates and fellow writers and teachers, but when it came to rewriting, I was at a loss. I didn't know how or where to begin, and the comments I received were all over the place, so I had to develop a system that took years to figure out. Part of the problem was I had no idea about structure, so I didn't know how to take my raw material and make it into a story that worked. And I would hear the saying, writing is rewriting. And it is. But that didn't really help me because I would rewrite and just write myself into a hole. The rewriting would generate more ideas and more bulk. So over the years, I've developed a system to help me and other writers guide the process. Rewriting isn't enough. There's got to be some strategy, and a lot of rewriting is taking things out that don't work in the story, that don't belong in this particular story. With writers I coach and manuscripts I edit, a lot of the work is shaving off the excess. But how do you know what to cut? And how do you know exactly what to rewrite and how to rewrite? Let me start by saying no one nails the perfect first draft. In fact, first drafts are meant to be messy. But what separates amateurs from serious writers is a willingness to reshape, refine, and even dismantle their work. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the art of rewriting, how to approach revision without losing your creative spark or your vision. In fact, revision can help you clarify your vision of the story. So in this episode, I'll walk you through the different phases of revision, share common mistakes writers make during rewrites, and give you actionable tips for turning your rough draft into a polished manuscript. So first, let's talk about the mindset of revision. First drafts are supposed to be messy. First drafts are for getting the story down, not getting it perfect. What you want to go for is momentum. So you want to detach from the preciousness of your first draft in order to revise it. Your early draft isn't sacred. It's just the first stage of your story. Rewriting requires some emotional distance. So you want to put the manuscript away for a few weeks at least before starting your revision. This way you have some objectivity and you're coming to it fresh. You'll see better what's working and what's not, because you're approaching it as a reader would. So let's talk about what we mean by rewriting and what we mean by editing. When is it time to rewrite versus tweak everything? Well, rewriting refers to the structural changes, plot, character arcs, major themes. So you want to have a broad overview of the structure in order to rewrite it. Editing, though, is refining the language. This is word choice, grammar, rhythm. So if you're still solving big story problems, you're in the rewriting phase, not the polishing phase. I tend to do a little of both, but I'll get to that in a minute. You don't want to start polishing something that is likely to be excised from the story later. Often writers will write 2 or 3 chapters that don't serve the story or that can be compressed into a shorter scene. So you don't want to start refining sentences for things that likely won't serve the story until you know that it's going to serve the story. That's why the big picture rewrite is more important. Okay, so let's look at the 3 phases of revision. Phase 1 is the big picture rewrite. This is all structural and developmental. This is where you address major issues in the story itself. That includes plot and pacing. Are there scenes that feel slow? Are there scenes that feel too rushed? Do the stakes escalate in a way that is compelling? Character arcs. Are your characters evolving believably? Do their desires and motivations feel clear? What about story logic? Are there plot holes or any inconsistencies? Or there anything that is inserted because you feel the story needs it? Is it contrived? Are the events plausible within the story's world? Are there major turning points, and where are they? Whether you follow the Save the Cat structure, the hero's journey, the story grid method, or any other structure, they all boil down to a story told in 3 acts. So, to make this simple, you want to look at what's happening at each phase of the story and what the purpose of each phase is. So, your first act is about 20 to 25% of your story. The big picture things to look at here: have you introduced the main characters? Have you introduced your protagonist and established the world as he or she knows it? Does your protagonist have a problem he or she must solve? Is there a clear antagonistic force? Is there an instigating event that pushes your protagonist to leave the world as he or she knows it, either physically or emotionally, behind, despite their resistance? The purpose of your first act is to set up the story and introduce the conflict. At the end of Act 1, your character has passed the point of no return, and this is the portal to Act 2. Act 2 is the bulk of your story. It's 50% of your story. It's where the conflict escalates. In the first half of Act 2, your protagonist is still reacting, but thinks he or she is solving the problem. Midway through Act 2, something happens that changes his or her trajectory. It's where your protagonist realizes, well, this is more serious than I thought, and he or she redirects and recommits to the goal. This is where your character takes a more serious approach to solving the problem. And then at the end of Act 2, there's a low point for your character where achieving the goal feels impossible. This is the all is lost moment. And then in Act 3, the last 20 to 25% of your story, your character rallies again to his or her final confrontation with the antagonist. And the climax is where the conflict is resolved for better or for worse. So structurally, those are the points you want to hit. Those are the big picture, macro level components you want to scan your story for. And this is where the rewrite comes in. So here are some tips for the big picture rewrite. You want to rewrite in layers. Tackle one main element at a time. For example, character arcs first, and then pacing. And then you can work on the structural elements. You really need to know your characters before you can structure your story. Then you can also print it out. Seeing the manuscript on paper often reveals pacing and consistency issues better than if it's on screen. And then you can create a reverse outline. This is super helpful. When you create a reverse outline, what you're doing is summarizing each scene in a sentence or two. And this helps you spot weak or redundant scenes. Okay, on to phase number 2, the scene level rewrite. Once your major structure is sound, you can refine scene by scene. So things you want to look for here is the scene purpose. Does each scene reveal new information, develop character, or escalate the conflict? Does it have tension and stakes? Are you making every scene do more work for the story? Is every scene having an intention and purpose that's moving towards the final act? Is each scene ending with a win or a loss for your character? Is something new revealed by the end of each scene? Is there some kind of conflict, big or small, creating tension in each scene? Here are some tips for the scene level rewrite. You want to cut any redundant scenes. This happens a lot where scenes go on for pages, and sometimes there's another scene that serves the same purpose. So you either want to merge those scenes or remove one of them. You want to make sure you're deepening the conflict. Ask, what could make this scene less easy for my protagonist? The conflict does not need to be anything earth-shattering. Your protagonist comes into the scene wanting or expecting something related to the global desire, and something or someone thwarts it. It could be as simple as he wants to get a run in after his wife comes home from work and can take over the childcare. But his wife calls to say she's working late, and could he make dinner? Is something new revealed in each scene that moves the story forward or reveals something essential about the characters? And finally, does each scene enhance sensory details? You always want to anchor the scene with sights, sounds, smells, and textures. And you want to make sure that we know where we are in each scene. Okay, on to phase 3. This is the line level rewrite. This is all about polishing. This is where you refine the language itself. So you're looking for clarity and precision. Are you using the strongest, most specific language possible? What about rhythm and flow? Do your sentences vary in length and cadence? How about the dialogue? Is it realistic? Is it in small beats? Is it too long? Is it expository? That's what you don't want. Does each character have a distinct voice? Here are some tips for the line level rewrite. You should read it aloud. This reveals clunky sentences and awkward phrasing. You want to eliminate filler words, so cut unnecessary words like just, very, really, sort of, then, or I remembered. Just bring us to the memory. Strengthen your verbs. You want to replace weak verbs with stronger, more specific ones. For example, she walked slowly through the snow is not as strong as she trudged through the snow. You want to simplify convoluted sentences and streamline wordy prose for clarity and impact. Okay, here are some common rewriting mistakes to avoid. Number 1, don't get stuck in perfectionism loops. You don't want to be constantly tweaking sentences in the early rewrites instead of fixing the larger structural issues. Take care of those first. Don't polish a scene that might be cut later. Number two, don't rush the rewrite. Thinking of one revision pass is not enough. So you want to think that rewriting is a multi-phase process. So you think of it in terms of layering. So don't rush into line editing too soon. And if you get feedback, don't ignore it or take that as a condemnation of your story or your ability to write it. Feedback is just feedback. So don't dismiss it, or worse, to defend your work. You don't have to take everyone's feedback, but you should consider it. So you have to detach emotionally and approach feedback with curiosity, not defensiveness. And number 4, let the draft rest. Too often, writers don't let their draft rest. They jump into revision too soon. So as soon as they finish the first draft, they're right into revision. Let your manuscript sit for 2 to 6 weeks before revising. Trust me on this, it will make all the difference. Okay, let's talk about some rewriting tips and tricks. Try to cut by 10%. This is a 10% rule. You want to challenge yourself to reduce your manuscript by at least 10%. This forces you to cut redundant or weak prose. Number 2, you can color code your rewrites. For example, you can use different highlighter colors for different issues. For example, you can use one highlighter for plot holes, one for the weak dialogue, one for unclear stakes, some for character arcs. This makes tackling revisions less overwhelming. And then you can do the manuscript surgery technique. This is a good option if you want to take certain sections out of the document and put it into a separate document. So you can copy paste problematic sections into a separate document and experiment with them. This lets you write boldly without fear of losing your original content. So if you wanted to tweak some sentences, and I find this useful personally, is to start writing certain passages in more of a line edit. This way I can cut the excess and see the story more clearly. But you can take certain problematic sections, just put it in a separate document, and just play and experiment with them. If it works, you can put it back. You can also Okay, so let's wrap this up. Rewriting is not about getting it right the first time. It's about sculpting your story into its strongest form. The first draft is where you discover your story, but revision is where you rediscover it, and it's where you refine it. You want to embrace rewriting as a creative, receptive act, not a chore or a punishment or a condemnation of your worth as a writer. Just treat it like it's a first draft with the same momentum. Okay, here are those 4 phases of revision. Number 1, the big picture rewrite. This is where you address major issues in the story itself. Plot and pacing, character arcs, story logic, turning points. Phase 2, the scene level rewrite. This is where you refine scene by scene. This is where you sculpt scene by scene. Make sure the scene is framed and that each scene reveals new information, develops the character, or escalates the conflict. And phase 3, the line level rewrite. This is where you polish, where you refine the language itself. You're looking for clarity and precision. You're looking for rhythm and flow, and you're looking for dialogue. So when you sit down with your messy first draft, remember, you're not destroying it, you're rebuilding it into something better.